Hey guys, it's Bill from Linden, Tennessee. So a couple weeks have passed now, and made quite a bit of progress on the Jeep. Last weekend, I spent just knee deep in wiring, 12-volt wiring. Last video, I think I showed you the contactor box was done, so that's kind of the high side, the high voltage side, and so last weekend was sort of the low voltage side. I got all the wiring done for the fog light. So now if you turn the headlights on, you just got your, oops, you got your headlights on, but if you put the high beams on, you get, this fog light that I'm using has two positions. It's got a low fog and a high fog. So you put the high beams on and the low fog comes on, and then you reach over to the, there you go, reach over to the fog light switch and you get the low fog light, or the high fog light. Anyway, so that's on. That's pretty cool. And then, of course, the where you at? Yeah, there you go. Light comes on for the fog light. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. And then the other thing I got wired up is the power steering system. I don't have the rest of the parts to make the power steering circuit work. If you remember, I'm going to have a speed switch that's going to tell the RPM of the output shafts, the drive shafts, and once it's above a certain amount of speed, it'll just cut power to the power steering pump completely. So above, say, 10 miles an hour, there'll be no power steering at all. But below that speed, below 10 miles an hour, the power steering pump will come on, and this little micro switch right there will, whenever you turn the steering wheel, say 90 degrees or something, it'll go into a little flat spot on that drive shaft, and it'll make the contact. And then what basically will happen is it'll ground the pump, and if you can hear that or not, but it'll make the power steering pump work. So, but then there'll be a timer on that as well. So if I'm in a parking lot and I'm waiting for somebody to get out of the way, I'm just not sitting there with my power steering pump running for no particular reason. It'll stop, and then for a quarter turn of the steering wheel, I won't have any power steering. But as soon as it gets to that little flat spot on the steering shaft, the pump will come on, and it'll stay on as long as I'm cycling. I'm moving the steering shaft enough to cycle that switch before the timer circuit times out. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's very confusing, but hopefully that'll work. I don't even know if it will or not, but it will. I know it will. No, I don't. I finished getting these fans sort of in there. So those came out really nice. They're all mounted in there, all permanent like. And let's see, what else? Oh, I had to redo one of these power steering lines because it was just leaking. It was just sitting here leaking, and so what had happened is these are braided steel lines. They've got a braiding on the outside, but on the inside it's this plastic liner, sort of like a Teflon liner, I guess. And when I assembled the fittings onto it, I just kind of kinked that liner, and it was leaking. So I had to replace that. So that's pretty cool, and that took the entire weekend. So that's just how that stuff works. And then this weekend, I had to take the drive unit back out again. If you remember, I put the 4.5-to-1 gears in there, gear set in there, and then I also put that Quaiffe limited slip differential in there. When I got this bolted together, I didn't have a way of turning the differential, but I could take the encoder off of the back of the motor here, so I could take this off, and there's a little reluctor wheel back there, and I was able to kind of stick a screwdriver in there and like try and turn the motor, but it wouldn't turn easily. It did turn, but it wouldn't turn easily. And then this week in the mail, I got these beautiful things. I'll show you these right here. So my buddy Randy Lee up in Canada, the same guy that did the stub axles, the stub shafts for the Doka when I was up there at EVTV. If you've not seen the Doka, go onto YouTube and search for Smoka Doka, SMOKADOKA, S-M-O-K-A, 2 words, Smoka Doka. And you'll see me doing a funny little stand in front of a yellow truck. And then click that and see what happens. It's pretty cool. So these are stub axles for 1350 U-joints. And that's the 7/16 bolts that will bolt to the flange that goes to the drive shaft that goes down to the differentials that sticks into the drive unit. So once I got these in the mail, I was able to stick these into the drive unit and have a little bit easier way of turning the thing to see if the gears would turn. And they didn't turn easily. They did turn, so it wasn't locked up, but they didn't turn well. And so I took the thing out and took it apart and tried to figure out what might be wrong. And I phoned a friend, if you will, about a shim that this drive unit has in it from the factory. There's a shim on this side, on this side of the. It doesn't matter. It's on this side of the differential. There's a shim, and I guess it's to compensate for an error in the factory or something. I don't know with the factory differential. Now with the Quaiffe differential, I thought maybe the Quaiffe differential might be a little bit wider, and that shim was causing it to bind up. So I took it apart, took the shim out. There it is. And put it back together, and lo and behold, it spins a whole lot easier now. It's still a little tighter than I'd like it, but I don't know what else I could possibly do. I'm glad that this made it better. If this didn't make it better, this video would be a little bit sadder. But this video is happy now because that worked. It worked well enough. I'm happy enough with how it turns to put it in there, and every once in a while I'll just drain some oil out of it and check for metal filings and all that stuff. And obviously, when I get it going, if it makes an absurd noise, then we'll have to cross that barrier when we get there. I hope we don't have to cross that. So that's that. The other thing I've done is I took the rear battery box, loaded it up with batteries, slung it up underneath the back of the Jeep, and then threw all the batteries into this back battery box. There's no mounts for this yet. I haven't even begun to play with this yet, but because I wanted to see how it sits, how the ride height is. And, well, there it is. I think this suspension kit is designed to ride much, much higher because I've almost run out of room on the shock absorber. There's a little bump stop on the shock absorber, and it is about bottomed out already, and I haven't even hit a bump yet. So, and then the front, without any weight in it, I'm kind of doing the Tennessee squat. If you know what I'm talking about, if you're from Tennessee, or maybe that's a Midwest thing, I don't know. Maybe it's a millennial thing, who knows. But to have your front end riding higher than your back end, it looks us old guys think it looks silly, but maybe it doesn't. Who are we to say? Who are we to judge? Then today, what I've done is I was working on the front battery box. I want to try and get it to a point where I can paint it. Yeah, I can paint it, and I can, it's like start getting serious about finishing this thing. I talked last week about, let me see if I can adjust this without turning it off. I talked last week about my little amp seals, my little connectors, and here they are. So 35 pin amp seal connector. This is the battery box part. So this has got all the little pins on it. Normally this would go into a breadboard, and you just, this whole thing would run over a vat of solder, and it would make little pointy solder joints. But I'm going to have to take a wire here and solder it, and then one here and solder it in here and here and here. And almost every one of these little 35 terminals is populated, so I'm going to have to do that. And then I'll have to crimp a connector that goes onto the BMS board on these battery modules. Each one of these has a connector that'll get crimped. And then on this female side, in this way, will go all the wires from the BMS. They'll go into here. And these get connectors, and they all get crimped. So, and of course, the wire that comes, the number one wire that comes from the BMS goes in the number one spot here, goes to the number one spot here, and then goes to the number one spot here. And likewise for 1 through 66 or whatever it is, 68. I don't know how many, there's a lot. And I got to get them all right. And I don't know how I'm going to do that, but that's, we'll find out. And this thing I got a little measured drawing from the internet that told me what the dimensions of this right here are, because I need to cut a hole in the side of my battery boxes. The front battery box that we're leaning on now is going to have 2 of these, and the other 2 boxes will each have 1. But I got to cut a hole here, and then I got to drill holes right there, because little bitty screws will screw this up to the battery box, and then, you know, of course this will plug into it. So I downloaded a picture and went on I got a mill at work, and I took all those measurements, and I got me an 1/8" piece of steel, and I drew, you know, I found the center of it, and I went over and I did it, and I milled it out to the exact right size as per the specs, and it didn't fit. So I had to wallow it out a little bit more, and I drilled the holes exactly where they go as per the specs. And when I put this in there, they didn't line up. So I had to come home and re-welded these, and then I just put this in here and stuck a drill bit through these holes, and that's how I found where these holes go. In the end, I don't think I'm gonna need the holes anyway, because I'll just make this cutout in the battery boxes, and then I'll just put this in to the battery box like that, and then I'll just transfer the holes using the connector itself. So that's how I'll do that. And then this thing is pretty cool. I've been looking for a way to get the high voltage, high current 2-aught cables out of the battery box, because they need to be disconnectable also. And this is what I came up with. There's a dude called Electric Scrambler on Instagram. He's you'll never guess what he's converting to electric. And he used these. These are Amphenol connectors, and they come from Mouser.com. And Mouser.com has so many parts. It's absurd how many parts and connectors and stuff. Like, I can't imagine what their warehouse is. It's actually probably not that big, because most of their stuff is very, very small. But so this part will go into the battery box and stick up, and that's what there'll be a cable that comes from the most positive and the most negative battery terminal of the battery box to one of these, and then this will stick through, and that'll stick out the backside, and then this will the 2-aught battery cable going wherever it comes from will go in here and then get crimped, just get squeezed. I think this hole here is designed that you could solder it, but I don't know how to solder something that big without burning the snot out of this too. So I'm just going to crimp it, and then you know, once that's all together, then you just push these together and click. It clicks. It's got a little lock on there, so that's pretty cool. So that's how that's going to work. And I believe that's all I've got for now. But it's been a pretty good couple of weeks. I got sick as a dog like earlier this week. I just woke up one morning and I was just miserable sick. I didn't go to work for a couple of days, and it was awful. But I got through that pretty good, and now here we are. So the next step is to get all these batteries out of here and put all the, you know, transfer all the holes for the connectors into it. And I have to get a piece of, I don't know what size, 1/8" or 3/16. It'll probably be about this tall. It'll stick down about that tall, and these bolts, and there'll be another one here and one here, here and here. Maybe actually more than that, maybe 2 and 2. They'll go through the 3/16 steel, and then I'll lift this whole thing up, set it in here, and then that 3/16 steel will back up against this. Then from behind, I'll weld that steel to these parts, and then unbolt it, and then you can lift the battery box out, and that steel part will be there, and it'll be kind of a locator of obviously where the battery box goes forward, but it'll be a way to hold the front of the battery box down. And yeah, in the back of the battery box will be held down by those, of course. But that's what I've got going on. That's what I've done. So I do appreciate you watching and staying with me and listening to me blather on. And I'm having a good time. I hope you're enjoying watching it. I can't wait to get this thing done. I think I'm somewhere between third base and home. Closer to third base than I am at home, but we're headed down that way, and that's very exciting. So thanks again for watching. I'll talk to you later.